The woman he destroyed returned after 10 years, and nobody survived what happened next.
Rain swallowed the city the night Elena disappeared. The streets of Black Hollow looked almost dead beneath the flickering amber streetlights, and the old church bell echoed through the fog like a warning nobody listened to anymore. 10 years ago, Elena Vale was the kind of girl people stared at twice. Pale skin, deep emerald eyes, soft black hair flowing like silk against winter coats, and a smile capable of warming the coldest rooms. But beauty becomes dangerous when the wrong man becomes obsessed with owning it. Adrian Cross was rich, charming, feared, and completely rotten beneath the expensive suits and seductive grin. He loved control more than love itself. Elena discovered that too late, the night she tried leaving him forever. He didn't scream. He didn't beg. He simply destroyed her quietly. He framed her father for murder, burned her reputation, and left her family to rot while the town watched in silence. The girl who once danced under moonlight vanished into darkness, and the city forgot her name. But forgotten girls are the most dangerous kind because pain survives longer than memory. Somewhere far away, Elena spent 10 years learning how monsters breathe, how revenge tastes, and how patience sharpens hatred into a blade sharp enough to carve through souls. The storm grew heavier as Elena stood beneath the broken neon sign of the abandoned train station, the same place where Adrian once promised he would love her forever. She remembered the smell of his expensive cologne mixing with cigarette smoke, while his fingers gently touched her face before those same hands ruined her existence piece by piece. Revenge did not erase heartbreak. It poisoned it slowly until love transformed into something colder than death itself. Elena opened a silver locket hanging around her neck. Inside was a faded photograph stained by time and rain, her younger self smiling beside Adrian before the nightmare began. For a brief second, sorrow softened her expression. Then the station speakers crackled alive with static, and her eyes hardened again. Adrian Cross was now the most powerful businessman in Black Hollow, worshipped by the same city that buried her alive years ago. He believed she died after disappearing. Tonight would be the first crack in his perfect world. Tonight the ghost he created was finally coming home. Adrian Cross stood before hundreds of wealthy guests inside the grand ballroom of the Raven Crest Hotel, smiling like a king untouched by sin. Crystal chandeliers bathed the room in golden light, while violins whispered through the air, masking the corruption hiding beneath every polished surface. Women admired him. Men feared him. Nobody in Black Hollow dared question how he built his empire so quickly after Elena vanished. Rumors once existed, but money buries truth deeper than graves. Adrian raised a glass of champagne while cameras flashed around him, celebrating the opening of his newest luxury project. Yet beneath his calm expression, something restless lived in his eyes tonight. He had been dreaming about Elena again, pale hands reaching through darkness, blood running down marble floors, whispers echoing his name from empty hallways. For 10 years he convinced himself guilt was weakness, but some ghosts refused to stay buried. The ballroom suddenly grew colder as the entrance doors slowly opened by themselves. The music stopped. Every guest turned toward the shadows near the doorway where a woman dressed entirely in black stood motionless beneath the rain. Adrian's heartbeat nearly stopped when he saw her face. Elena Vale had returned. The silence inside the ballroom became unbearable. Elena walked slowly across the polished floor while water dripped from her coat, leaving dark trails behind her like shadows following death itself. Nobody dared move. Adrian felt his chest tighten as memories he spent years burying clawed back into his mind. He remembered Elena crying in the snow while he coldly watched police drag her innocent father away. He remembered signing fake documents that destroyed her family name. Worst of all, he remembered loving her once before greed corrupted everything inside him. Elena stopped only inches away from him, her emerald eyes glowing beneath the dim chandelier light. She looked even more beautiful than before, but there was something unnatural about her now, a stillness that felt almost supernatural. Adrian forced himself to smile despite the fear rising in his throat. "Elena," he whispered. She tilted her head slightly and smiled back, soft and terrifying at the same time. "Did you miss me, Adrian?" she asked quietly. The lights suddenly flickered. Somewhere in the hotel, a woman screamed. The scream echoing through the Raven Crest Hotel shattered the frozen silence like broken glass across marble floors. Guests panicked instantly, their terrified whispers spreading through the ballroom while security guards rushed toward the eastern corridor. Adrian's pulse hammered violently beneath his tailored suit as Elena remained perfectly calm before him, almost amused by the chaos unfolding around them. The lights above flickered again, slower this time, bathing her pale face in flashes of gold and darkness that made her appear less human and more like a beautiful nightmare resurrected from the grave. Adrian tried convincing himself this was only coincidence, only fear playing tricks on his mind, yet deep inside he knew Elena never did anything without purpose. She had returned for something far worse than forgiveness. The scent of rain and old perfume surrounded her as she stepped closer, enough for Adrian to notice the faint scar running beneath her jawline, a scar he remembered causing during their final night together when rage consumed him completely. Guilt stabbed through him unexpectedly, but Elena's cold expression revealed no weakness, only patience sharpened over 10 years of suffering. Then the hotel manager stumbled into the ballroom trembling with horror, barely able to breathe. "Sir?" he whispered toward Adrian, his voice shaking violently. "Someone is dead upstairs." Adrian immediately rushed toward the upper floor with security following close behind while Elena walked slowly behind them, her heels echoing through the silent corridor like the ticking of an execution clock. The air upstairs felt strangely cold, and every hallway light buzzed faintly as if the hotel itself feared what waited ahead. When Adrian entered the private suite at the end of the corridor, his entire body froze. One of his closest business partners lay dead beside the fireplace, eyes wide open in terror. Written across the wall above the corpse in dark crimson letters were the words Adrian hoped never to see again. "Monsters never change." The same sentence Elena once wrote in her diary years ago after discovering his betrayal. Security officers searched the room frantically, but no doors or windows were open. Nobody understood how the killer escaped. Adrian slowly turned toward Elena standing silently near the doorway, her expression unreadable beneath the dim lighting. For a long moment neither spoke. Then Elena's lips curled into a soft smile filled with pain, romance, hatred, and something far darker than revenge. "This is only the beginning," she whispered gently while thunder exploded outside the hotel windows. The storm over Black Hollow refused to end. Rain hammered against the towering windows of the Raven Crest Hotel while police sealed every entrance, and terrified guests whispered about curses, ghosts, and revenge. Adrian Cross stood alone inside his private office on the highest floor, gripping a glass of whiskey tightly enough to crack it in his hand. Blood slowly dripped across his fingers, but he barely noticed. His mind remained trapped on Elena's face, unchanged by time, untouched by weakness, more hauntingly beautiful than the night he destroyed her life. He kept replaying her voice in his head, calm and soft like poison poured into wine. "This is only the beginning." For the first time in years, Adrian felt genuine fear. Not fear of death, but fear of exposure. Because if Elena truly returned to destroy him, she carried secrets capable of collapsing everything he built. The empire. The reputation. The lies. Outside his office, thunder rolled through the city while old memories returned one by one like corpses rising from graves. He remembered the winter night he forged evidence against Elena's father. He remembered paying corrupt officers to silence witnesses. Most painfully, he remembered the way Elena cried when she begged him to stop. Back then he chose power over love without hesitation. Now darkness had finally come to collect its debt. A sudden knock shattered the silence inside the office. Adrian quickly hid his injured hand before allowing the visitor inside. His personal assistant Sophia entered nervously, her face pale beneath the dim golden lights. "Sir?" she whispered carefully. The woman from downstairs disappeared. Adrian's expression darkened instantly. Security cameras had lost Elena only minutes earlier after she entered the west corridor near the abandoned hotel wing, a section closed for years after a mysterious fire killed several workers during construction. Some believed the place was cursed. Adrian never believed such stories until tonight. Without another word, he grabbed his coat and headed toward the elevator while Sophia followed anxiously behind him. As they descended deeper into the hotel, the atmosphere changed completely. The warm luxury vanished, replaced by rotting wallpaper, broken chandeliers, and endless darkness stretching through forgotten hallways. Water dripped from rusted pipes while distant whispers echoed faintly through the abandoned corridor. Adrian suddenly noticed something chilling written across the dusty mirror ahead in fresh crimson lipstick. "Love made you weak." Beneath the message rested a single black rose covered in rainwater. Sophia trembled beside him, but Adrian slowly picked up the flower, realizing with horror it carried Elena's old perfume scent, the same scent he once kissed from her skin 10 years ago. The deeper Adrian walked into the abandoned wing, the heavier the air became, thick with dust, mold, and memories better left buried. Every step echoed through the dark corridor, while Sophia stayed close behind him, clutching his arm whenever distant noises whispered through the walls. The old section of Raven Crest had been sealed for nearly a decade after the mysterious fire, yet tonight it felt strangely alive. Flickering lights buzzed overhead, illuminating faded paintings of faceless women whose cracked eyes seemed to follow them through the shadows. Adrian kept staring at the black rose in his hand, unable to ignore the scent pulling him backward into the past. Elena used to leave black roses beside his piano whenever they argued. She once told him they symbolized love surviving even after death. At the time he laughed at her dramatic nature. Now those words felt like prophecy. Suddenly Sophia stopped walking. Her face turned pale as she pointed toward the end of the hallway where an old record player slowly turned by itself beneath a flickering lamp. Soft romantic music echoed through the corridor, the exact piano melody Adrian composed for Elena years ago during their first winter together. Nobody else knew that song existed. His heartbeat slowed with pure dread while memories of Elena dancing barefoot beneath candlelight consumed his mind again. The melody grew louder, sadder, almost mournful, like a ghost remembering love before hatred poisoned it forever. Adrian slowly approached the record player as the piano melody echoed around him like a heartbeat from another lifetime. His trembling hand reached toward the spinning vinyl, but before he could stop it, the music suddenly distorted into violent static. Every hallway light exploded at once, plunging the corridor into darkness. Sophia screamed. Somewhere nearby, footsteps echoed slowly across the floor, heels clicking with calm precision through the blackness. Adrian's breathing became uneven as memories and reality blurred together around him. Then a faint red emergency light flickered alive at the far end of the corridor, revealing Elena standing motionless beneath it. Her pale face glowed against the darkness while her black dress moved softly in the cold wind flowing through broken windows. She looked less like a woman now and more like something the storm itself created. Adrian tried speaking, but fear strangled the words before they escaped. Elena finally stepped forward, her emerald eyes locked onto his. "Do you remember this hallway?" she asked softly. Adrian's blood ran cold because he did remember. 10 years ago, this was the exact place where he first struck her during an argument after she threatened to expose his crimes. Elena touched the scar beneath her jaw gently before smiling with heartbreaking sadness. "You said you loved me that night," she whispered. "Right before you ruined my life." Adrian stared at Elena beneath the blood-red emergency light, while the storm outside roared like something alive clawing against the hotel walls. For several unbearable seconds Heather moved. The abandoned hallway felt frozen in time, trapped between the memory of love and the birth of hatred. Elena's emerald eyes held no tears now, only the cold stillness created by 10 years of suffering. Adrian wanted to deny everything, wanted to convince himself he had reasons for what happened back then, but excuses sounded meaningless in the presence of the woman he destroyed. Sophia stood trembling behind him, unable to understand the terrifying tension filling the corridor. Elena slowly walked closer until only a few feet separated them. Her perfume mixed with dust and rain, awakening memories Adrian buried beneath money and power. He remembered kissing her neck in this very hallway while she laughed softly against his chest. He remembered promising her forever. Then greed poisoned everything. "Why are you doing this?" Adrian finally whispered, his voice weak for the first time in years. Elena tilted her head slightly, almost disappointed by the question. "Because you taught me what love becomes when it rots," she answered quietly. Thunder exploded outside as the emergency lights flickered violently again, briefly plunging her face into darkness before revealing a faint smile that carried both heartbreak and danger. Before Adrian could respond, a loud metallic crash echoed somewhere deeper within the abandoned wing. Sophia gasped in fear while Elena calmly stepped backward into the darkness, her silhouette fading beneath the flickering lights like a ghost disappearing into smoke. Adrian instinctively chased after her despite Sophia begging him to stop. The deeper he ran through the corridor, the stranger the hotel became. Old wallpaper peeled from the walls like dead skin while cold air carried faint whispers through every room. Then Adrian suddenly froze outside an old ballroom hidden behind rusted double doors. Soft candlelight glowed beneath the cracks. Impossible. This room had been destroyed years ago during the fire. Slowly he pushed the doors open and his breath stopped instantly. The ballroom inside looked untouched by time. Hundreds of black candles illuminated the massive room while dark roses covered the marble floor. At the center stood Elena wearing the exact silver dress she wore the night he betrayed her 10 years earlier. Beautiful. Heartbreaking. Deadly. Slow romantic music drifted through the ballroom as she extended her hand toward him with a sorrowful smile. "One last dance, Adrian," she whispered softly. For a moment the fear vanished completely, replaced by the dangerous memory of how deeply he once loved her. And somewhere hidden behind the music, unseen by Adrian, several shadowy figures silently watched from the darkness above the ballroom balcony. The candlelit ballroom felt suspended between dream and nightmare. Adrian stood motionless near the doorway while the soft piano melody echoed through the massive chamber, wrapping around his mind like a spell pulling him backward through time. Elena remained at the center of the ballroom, her silver dress glowing beneath the candlelight exactly as it had 10 years ago during the last night they danced together before everything collapsed. For a dangerous moment Adrian forgot the dead body upstairs, forgot the blood written on hotel walls, forgot the terror consuming Raven Crest tonight. All he saw was the woman he once loved more than his own soul. Elena's expression softened slightly as she extended her hand again. "Are you afraid of me now?" she asked quietly. Adrian swallowed hard before slowly stepping toward her. Fear still lingered inside him, but something stronger pulled him forward. Guilt, obsession, desire, or perhaps the desperate need to believe the past could somehow be undone. When his hand finally touched hers, icy coldness rushed through his body. Elena's skin felt almost unreal beneath his fingers. Yet her eyes held unbearable sadness hidden beneath the darkness she now carried. The music grew louder as she gently pulled him closer, and soon they began moving slowly across the ballroom floor surrounded by candles flickering like funeral flames in the endless shadows around them. As they danced, Elena rested one hand softly against Adrian's chest exactly where his heartbeat thundered beneath the fabric of his suit. Her closeness awakened memories he spent years trying to bury. Late-night kisses beneath snowfall, whispered promises in empty apartments, her laughter echoing through dark rooms before corruption poisoned his soul completely. Adrian stared into her emerald eyes searching for humanity still hidden somewhere beneath the vengeance. "I never stopped thinking about you," he admitted quietly. Elena smiled faintly, though pain flickered across her face for a brief second. "That's the curse of destroying someone," she whispered. "A part of them stays inside you forever." The ballroom lights suddenly dimmed lower while the piano music slowed into something darker and more haunting. Adrian finally noticed strange figures standing motionless around the edges of the room beneath the shadows. Men and women wearing black masks silently watched them dance without moving or speaking. Their presence sent fear crawling through his veins again. "Who are they?" he asked nervously. Elena gently leaned closer until her lips nearly touched his ear. "Victims," she whispered softly. "People destroyed by monsters hiding behind beautiful smiles." Adrian's face paled instantly because deep inside he understood the truth. Every masked figure in the ballroom had once suffered because of him. And tonight Elena intended to force him to face every ghost he created. The masked figures surrounding the ballroom remained completely silent while Adrian and Elena continued moving slowly across the marble floor. Their footsteps echoed beneath the haunting piano melody like a funeral march disguised as romance. Adrian tried avoiding the hollow black eyes hidden behind the masks, yet every figure felt painfully familiar. Some were former employees he ruined to protect his business empire. Others were families destroyed after he bribed officials, manipulated evidence, and buried scandals beneath money. Faces from his past now stood motionless in the shadows like living accusations waiting for judgment. Elena watched his fear carefully while her fingers remained locked around his hand with unnatural calmness. "You built your kingdom on suffering," she whispered. "Did you really think nobody would remember?" Adrian's breathing grew uneven as guilt pressed heavier against his chest. For years he convinced himself power justified cruelty. Now every lie seemed alive inside this cursed ballroom. Suddenly one masked woman stepped forward beneath the candlelight and slowly removed her mask. Adrian froze instantly. It was Claire Morgan, a journalist who vanished 5 years ago after investigating his corruption. Rumors claimed she left the country, but the terror in her eyes tonight revealed a far darker truth. "You destroyed my life," she said quietly while tears streamed down her face. More figures began removing their masks one by one, each carrying pain Adrian once ignored without remorse. Adrian stumbled backward away from Elena as the room filled with whispers from the past. Voices overlapped around him like ghosts clawing through darkness, accusations, screams, broken promises, cries for mercy he once silenced without hesitation. The candle flames flickered violently while thunder shook the ballroom windows. Adrian covered his ears desperately, but the voices only grew louder. "Stop this!" he shouted. "This isn't real!" Elena remained perfectly still at the center of the ballroom, her silver dress flowing softly around her, while sorrow darkened her expression. "No, Adrian," she answered calmly. "This is the first honest moment of your life." Suddenly the grand piano stopped playing by itself. Silence crashed over the ballroom instantly. Then slow footsteps echoed from the staircase above. Every masked figure turned toward the balcony as a tall man emerged from the shadows wearing an elegant black coat. Adrian's face strained of all color the moment he recognized him. Victor Hale, Elena's father. The same man Adrian framed for murder 10 years ago. The same man officially declared dead inside prison 3 years earlier. Victor descended the staircase slowly, his eyes cold with endless hatred while prison scars covered his weathered face. Adrian staggered backward in complete shock. "Impossible," he whispered. Elena's lips curled into a faint heartbreaking smile. "You buried innocent people alive, Adrian," she said softly. "Did you really believe death would protect you from them forever?" Adrian's entire body trembled as Victor Hale descended the staircase one slow step at a time beneath the flickering candlelight. The ballroom felt colder now, almost suffocating, as though the walls themselves were closing around him. 10 years ago Adrian personally ensured Victor disappeared forever inside Blackstone prison after framing him for a murder he never committed. When news of Victor's death reached the city 3 years earlier, Adrian celebrated quietly with champagne and expensive cigars. Yet here he stood now, alive, scarred, and staring at him with the eyes of a man who survived hell only to return for vengeance. Elena walked calmly toward her father and gently touched his arm. For the first time that night, Adrian noticed softness in her expression again. Not hatred. Love. Painfully human love surviving beneath all the darkness. Victor kept his eyes locked on Adrian while speaking in a voice roughened by years of suffering. "Do you remember what you said when they dragged me away?" he asked quietly. Adrian's breathing became uneven because he remembered perfectly. He had leaned close to Victor that snowy night and whispered, "Nobody will ever believe your daughter over me." The memory struck him like a blade to the chest. Elena slowly turned back toward Adrian, heartbreak visible beneath her coldness now. "You didn't just ruin my life," she whispered softly. "You destroyed everyone who ever loved me." Suddenly the massive ballroom doors slammed shut behind Adrian with explosive force. The candle flames stretched violently as freezing wind rushed through the room, extinguishing half the lights instantly. Panic surged through Adrian's chest while the masked figures slowly surrounded him from every direction. Elena stepped closer again, but this time her eyes carried tears shimmering beneath the candlelight. Not tears of weakness, tears born from remembering the woman she once used to be before Adrian turned love into horror. "I waited 10 years for tonight," she said quietly. "Not because I wanted your death, but because I wanted you to finally feel what I felt." Adrian looked around desperately, realizing every exit was gone. The ballroom itself seemed alive now, breathing with darkness and grief. Then Victor reached into his coat and pulled out an old cassette tape recorder. Adrian's blood turned cold instantly. He recognized it immediately. 10 years ago, during their final argument, Adrian drunkenly confessed every crime he committed while threatening Elena and her father. He believed the recording was destroyed in the fire afterward. Victor slowly pressed play. Static crackled through the ballroom before Adrian's younger voice echoed across the silence, confessing everything: bribery, corruption, violence, even the murder he framed on Victor. Every masked figure listened without moving while Adrian's empire collapsed in real time around him. Elena closed her eyes briefly as tears finally escaped down her pale cheeks. "No," she whispered painfully. "Everyone will know what kind of monster I loved." The confession echoed through the ballroom like a curse finally awakened after years of silence. Adrian's own voice filled the chamber, cold and arrogant, describing every crime with terrifying clarity while the masked figures stood motionless around him. Each sentence ripped away another piece of the empire he spent a decade building. Elena remained near her father beneath the dying candlelight, tears still glistening against her pale cheeks as she listened to the man she once loved destroy himself with his own words. Adrian felt the room spinning around him. For the first time in his life, power could not save him. Money could not silence the truth. The recording continued playing while thunder roared outside the ballroom windows, almost as if the storm itself demanded justice. "I ruined them because nobody says no to me." His younger voice laughed from the cassette. Adrian covered his face in horror, unable to bear hearing the monster he used to be. Yet Elena never looked away. She forced herself to hear every word because surviving pain meant facing it completely. Suddenly distant police sirens echoed from outside Raven Crest Hotel. Sophia must have contacted authorities after disappearing earlier. Panic surged through Adrian's chest again. If the tape reached the police, everything would end tonight. His empire, his freedom, his name. Desperation slowly replaced fear inside his eyes while darkness returned to his expression once more. Without warning, Adrian lunged toward Victor, rage exploding through him like fire consuming dry wood. The cassette recorder crashed onto the marble floor while masked figures screamed and chaos erupted across the ballroom instantly. Elena shouted in horror as Adrian violently grabbed Victor by the throat, years of buried panic transforming him into the same monster he once was. "You think you can destroy me?" Adrian snarled furiously while Victor struggled beneath his grip. The remaining candles flickered wildly as thunder shook the massive ballroom again. Elena rushed forward trying to pull Adrian away, but he shoved her violently against the grand piano. The sound echoed brutally through the chamber. For one horrifying second, silence followed. Adrian froze immediately after realizing what he had done. Elena slowly lifted her face from the piano edge, blood running softly from her forehead, while tears mixed with rainwater still clinging to her skin. The ballroom became deathly still again. Even the masked figure stopped moving. Adrian stared at Elena in shock because her expression had changed completely. The sadness was gone now. The love was gone too. Only darkness remained inside her emerald eyes. She stood slowly beneath the candlelight, blood tracing down her pale face like crimson tears while the storm raged behind her. "You never changed," she whispered softly. Then every light inside the ballroom suddenly went out at once. Darkness swallowed the ballroom completely. The only light remaining came from flashes of lightning outside the towering windows, illuminating the chamber in brief violent bursts of white and blue. Panic spread among the masked figures as whispers and frightened breathing echoed through the blackness. Adrian stumbled backward, struggling to see while guilt and terror twisted together inside his chest. Somewhere nearby, Elena's slow footsteps echoed across the marble floor with terrifying calmness. Click, click, click. Each step sounded closer than the last. Adrian's pulse hammered wildly as memories of their final night returned in painful fragments. Elena crying beneath rain-soaked streets, his hands grabbing her arm too violently, her voice begging him to stop before he destroyed everything. Back then he ignored her pain because power mattered more than love. Now the darkness itself seemed determined to force him into reliving every sin. A flash of lightning suddenly illuminated the ballroom again, revealing Elena standing only a few feet away. Blood still traced down her forehead, but her expression remained unnaturally calm. Beautiful and horrifying at the same time. "Do you know what hurt the most?" she asked softly. Adrian could not answer. Elena stepped closer while tears mixed with the blood on her pale skin. "Not the lies. Not the betrayal. It was realizing the man I loved never truly existed." Thunder exploded overhead as the ballroom plunged into darkness again. Adrian's breathing became ragged as Elena's words cut deeper than any threat could. For years he convinced himself emotions were weakness, yet hearing the heartbreak in her voice shattered something inside him he thought died long ago. "Elena," he whispered helplessly into the darkness. Another lightning flash revealed her standing beside the grand piano, fingers gently touching its cracked surface. The haunting melody from earlier suddenly began playing again by itself despite nobody sitting at the keys. Slow, romantic, tragic. Elena closed her eyes briefly while the music echoed through the ruined ballroom like a dying memory refusing to disappear. "I used to dream about our future," she admitted quietly. "A house near the ocean, children, peace." Adrian felt tears burning unexpectedly in his eyes because once, long before greed poisoned him, he dreamed about those things too. For one impossible moment the revenge, the fear, and the horror faded beneath the weight of what they lost. But then Elena slowly opened her eyes again, and the darkness returned instantly. Police sirens screamed louder outside the hotel now. Red and blue lights flashed faintly through the storm-covered windows. Adrian realized time was running out. Desperation consumed him completely. If he lost everything tonight, he would drag Elena down with him. His trembling hand slowly moved toward the hidden pistol beneath his coat, while Elena watched him silently from across the candlelit darkness. The piano melody echoed through the dark ballroom like the final heartbeat of a dying love story. Elena stood motionless beside the instrument, while stormlight flashed across her pale face, illuminating the blood still tracing softly down her skin. Adrian's trembling fingers tightened around the hidden pistol beneath his coat as police sirens screamed louder outside Raven Crest Hotel. Every path was collapsing around him. His empire, his reputation, his carefully built lies, all drowning beneath the truth Elena dragged back from the grave. Yet even now, while fear consumed him completely, part of him still loved her in the most twisted and poisonous way imaginable. "Don't do this," Adrian whispered weakly, though he no longer knew whether he was begging for his freedom or begging for her forgiveness. Elena stared at him with heartbreaking calmness. "You already did this 10 years ago," she answered softly. Lightning exploded across the sky again, revealing tears shimmering in her emerald eyes. Adrian suddenly pulled the pistol from his coat and aimed it directly at Victor Hale standing near the shattered ballroom doors. Gasps filled the darkness instantly. "Nobody leaves this hotel!" Adrian shouted desperately, his voice cracking with panic and rage. The masked figures backed away in terror while Elena remained perfectly still beside the piano. The storm outside roared louder, as if the city itself sensed blood approaching. Adrian's hands shook violently around the weapon, but deep inside he knew the truth already. Monsters always destroy everything they touch, especially the people they once claimed to love. For several endless seconds nobody moved. The ballroom remained frozen beneath thunder and darkness while Adrian pointed the gun toward Victor with trembling desperation. Then Elena slowly began walking toward him. Calm, fearless, beautiful in the most tragic way imaginable. Her silver dress flowed softly across the marble floor while candle flames flickered weakly around her like dying stars. "Put the gun down, Adrian," she whispered gently. Her voice carried no hatred now, only exhaustion. The exhaustion of loving someone who destroyed everything good inside himself. Adrian stared at her approaching figure, memories crashing through his mind faster than he could breathe. Their first kiss beneath snowfall, her laughter during sleepless nights, the way she once looked at him like he was the safest place in the world. Tears finally escaped his eyes as his grip weakened around the pistol. "I never meant for this to happen," he choked painfully. Elena stopped directly in front of him, close enough to touch. "But it did," she answered quietly. Then suddenly another gunshot exploded through the ballroom. Elena gasped sharply as crimson spread across her silver dress. Time itself seemed to stop. Adrian's eyes widened in horror because he had not pulled the trigger. Slowly both of them turned toward the shattered doorway where Sophia stood trembling violently, smoke rising from the pistol in her hands while tears streamed down her terrified face. "I'm sorry," Sophia whispered brokenly. "He told me to protect him." The gunshot echoed endlessly through the ballroom long after silence returned. Elena collapsed slowly into Adrian's arms while crimson spread across her silver dress like shattered roses blooming beneath candlelight. For one horrifying second nobody moved. The storm outside continued raging against Raven Crest Hotel, but inside the ballroom time itself seemed frozen around grief, regret, and blood. Adrian dropped the pistol instantly, and caught Elena before she struck the marble floor. His breathing shattered into panic as he stared at the blood staining his hands. The same hands that ruined her life years ago, now desperately trying to save it. "No, no, Elena, stay with me," he whispered frantically while tears streamed down his face without restraint. Sophia stood near the doorway trembling violently, the smoking gun slipping from her fingers onto the floor. She looked completely broken by what she had done. Victor rushed toward his daughter, horror consuming his scarred face as he knelt beside her. Elena winced softly from the pain but somehow managed to lift her trembling hand toward Adrian's cheek. Even now, after everything, her touch remained gentle. "You see?" she whispered weakly. "Everyone around you becomes destroyed eventually." Adrian broke completely at those words. The monster inside him finally collapsed beneath the unbearable weight of guilt, love, and loss. Sirens screamed louder downstairs as police stormed the hotel, but Adrian no longer cared about prison, money, or survival. All that mattered now was the dying woman in his arms. Elena's breathing weakened while thunder rolled across the city like distant funeral drums. Adrian pressed trembling hands against the wound, desperately trying to stop the bleeding, but the crimson spreading across her dress only grew darker beneath the candlelight. "Please," he whispered brokenly. "Don't leave me again." Elena stared up at him silently for several seconds, her emerald eyes softer now than they had been all night. The hatred inside them was fading, replaced by sorrow and exhaustion. "I already left you 10 years ago," she murmured faintly. Adrian lowered his forehead against hers while tears mixed with the rainwater still clinging to her skin. Around them the masked figures slowly removed their masks completely, revealing faces filled not with vengeance anymore, but sadness. Because revenge never truly healed anyone. It only spread pain from one broken soul into another. Elena weakly reached into her coat and pulled out the silver locket she carried since the beginning of the night. Inside remained the faded photograph of them together before darkness consumed everything. She placed it gently into Adrian's shaking hand. "I wanted to hate you forever," she whispered painfully. "But some love stories rot instead of ending." Adrian closed his eyes as sobs escaped him uncontrollably. Then suddenly Elena's body went still in his arms while the final piano note echoed through the ballroom one last time. The silence after Elena's final breath felt more terrifying than the storm itself. Adrian remained frozen on the ballroom floor holding her lifeless body while rain and police sirens echoed distantly beyond the shattered windows. The candles around them flickered weakly, casting trembling shadows across Elena's peaceful face as though the darkness itself mourned her. Victor slowly lowered his head beside his daughter, unable to speak through the grief crushing him from within. Sophia stood motionless near the doorway, horrified by what her fear and loyalty had caused. But Adrian heard none of them anymore. His entire world had collapsed into the woman resting silently in his arms. For years he believed power made him untouchable. Yet nothing prepared him for the emptiness of losing the only person who ever truly loved him before corruption poisoned his soul. His fingers trembled around the silver locket Elena gave him moments earlier. Inside the faded photograph, younger versions of themselves smiled innocently beside snowfall and candlelight. Two people who once believed love could survive anything. Adrian stared at the image while tears fell endlessly onto the photograph. "I'm sorry," he whispered brokenly against Elena's forehead. "I'm so sorry." But apologies arriving too late are often crueler than silence itself. Somewhere beyond the ballroom doors, armed police officers finally stormed into Raven Crest Hotel while the storm outside slowly began to fade into cold midnight rain. Heavy footsteps echoed through the ballroom as police officers surrounded the room with weapons raised. Red and blue emergency lights flashed across the black candles, broken glass, and blood-stained marble floor, creating a horrifying mixture of reality and nightmare. Adrian never resisted when officers approached him. He simply continued holding Elena while staring emptily at the storm outside. The empire he spent 10 years protecting had finally died beside the woman he destroyed. Detectives quickly secured the cassette recorder containing Adrian's confession, while terrified hotel guests watched from distant corridors. Everything was over now. The lies, the manipulation, the monster he became. Victor slowly stood and looked down at Adrian with exhausted hatred. "You took my daughter from me long before tonight," he said quietly. Adrian lowered his eyes in shame because he knew it was true. Elena did not truly die from the bullet alone. Part of her died the night Adrian shattered her life 10 years earlier. As officers finally pulled him away in handcuffs, Adrian clutched the silver locket tightly against his chest like the final piece of a ruined soul. Then, just before leaving the ballroom, he suddenly noticed something impossible. The grand piano at the center of the room began playing softly by itself again. The same haunting melody he once composed for Elena. Every officer froze in confusion, while cold winds swept through the candles. And for the briefest moment, Adrian swore he saw Elena standing near the shattered window smiling sadly at him before disappearing into the darkness forever. Months passed after the tragedy at Raven Crest Hotel, yet Black Hollow never truly recovered from the night Elena Vale returned from the shadows. News channels called it the Midnight Ballroom Massacre, though nobody could fully explain the strange events witnessed inside the abandoned wing. Adrian Cross confessed to every crime after his arrest without resistance. The once powerful businessman became nothing more than a broken man haunted by memories he could no longer escape. His empire collapsed within days. Corrupt officials vanished. Hidden crimes surfaced one after another like corpses floating from deep water. But prison became a far crueler punishment than chains or walls. Every night Adrian dreamed of Elena. Sometimes she stood silently beside rain-covered windows wearing her silver dress. Other nights she danced alone beneath candlelight, while blood slowly stained the marble floor around her bare feet. Yet the most terrifying dreams were the gentle ones, moments where she smiled exactly as she did before he ruined her life, reminding him of the man he could have been if greed never poisoned his heart. The silver locket never left his possession. Guards often found him staring at the faded photograph for hours in complete silence. Meanwhile, Black Hollow whispered darker rumors. Guests staying near Raven Crest Hotel claimed soft piano music still echoed from the abandoned ballroom after midnight, especially during storms. Some even reported seeing a pale woman near the shattered windows watching the rain with sorrowful emerald eyes. 1 year later, during the anniversary of the ballroom tragedy, Raven Crest Hotel officially closed forever. Nobody wanted to enter the building anymore after countless reports of unexplained whispers, candlelight appearing inside empty rooms, and haunting piano melodies echoing through abandoned corridors. The city attempted erasing the story completely, but some tragedies grow stronger when buried. Late that night, heavy rain returned to Black Hollow exactly as it had on the night Elena came home. A lone night guard walked through the deserted hotel corridors checking locked entrances when he suddenly heard soft music drifting from the abandoned ballroom upstairs. Nervous but curious, he followed the sound through dark hallways illuminated only by lightning flashes outside the windows. When he finally reached the ballroom doors, they slowly creaked open by themselves. Hundreds of black candles burned inside despite the room being sealed for months. Dark roses covered the marble floor again. And at the center of the ballroom stood Elena Vale wearing her silver dress, dancing slowly beneath the candlelight with a shadowy man whose face remained hidden in darkness. The guard froze in terror as Elena suddenly lifted her head toward him. Her emerald eyes glowed softly while a sad smile touched her lips. Then the candles extinguished instantly. Darkness swallowed the ballroom completely. When the lights returned seconds later, the room stood empty except for a single black rose resting on the floor beside an old silver locket. And somewhere deep inside the hotel, a woman's soft laughter echoed through the storm one final Tim. Some love stories are not destroyed by hate, but by the darkness people choose over love. And sometimes the ghosts that return for revenge are not seeking death, only the truth buried.